1991. Havana. A hospital accountant stands in a bread line before sunrise, holding ration coupons folded soft from use. In her other hand, 2 eggs wrapped in newspaper, already warm. She watches the bakery door stay closed. The bread is gone. How does a country surrounded by sugarcane and sunlight run out of breakfast? Most people believe food begins with land, soil, rain, seasons, and the quiet competence of farmers. If there is enough farmland, there will be enough food. Scarcity belongs to droughts, wars, and distant places. That belief feels reasonable. It is also wrong, because modern abundance does not begin in the field. It begins in a fertilizer plant connected to a natural gas pipeline. It begins in diesel stored for tractors, pumps, harvesters, refrigerated trucks. Miss one link, and the shelves still look full. For a while, Cuba was not an exception. It was an early warning from a system most countries later copied in a quieter form. In high-yield farming, remove synthetic nitrogen and the harvest does not gently decline. In some systems, it can fall by half. The soil remains. The rain still falls. The calories do not. The failure is rarely dramatic at first. It looks like accounting. A farmer can own 2,000 acres and still lose money planting wheat if diesel rises faster than the crop price. One tank $200. 1 week later, the math no longer works, so the field stays unplanted. The accountant and the farmer are solving the same problem. One sees it at the bakery, the other sees it at the diesel pump. The supermarket does not notice in April. Neither does the customer buying strawberries in January, or chicken breast at midnight, or bread that costs less than the fuel required to deliver it. The illusion survives on timing. The cause happens in spring. The panic arrives in winter. I learned this the first time I watched fertilizer prices rise months before grocery prices did. The older I study food systems, the less I trust full shelves. Shelves show inventory. Inputs show survival. The shelves fail long after the system already did. By then, responsible people are standing in lines, counting coins, discovering that salary and savings cannot purchase what was never grown. Stay with this mechanism because once you see where the calories really come from, the grocery store starts to look very different. And somewhere in Havana, the accountant already understood what the supermarket customer would learn too late. Civilizations do not run out of food because farmers forget how to farm. They run out of food because invisible inputs fail first. One counts ration coupons, the other counts diesel gallons. Both are measuring the same shortage. The accountant in Havana felt it with ration coupons in her hand. The wheat farmer feels it standing beside a tractor, staring at a fuel invoice he cannot justify signing. People still imagine fertilizer as an optional enhancement, something modern farming uses to make profits larger, as if the real harvest still comes from soil and chemicals simply make it prettier. That is not how the system works. Modern commercial agriculture was built around one industrial breakthrough, taking nitrogen from the air and forcing it into ammonia using natural gas, pressure, and heat. Synthetic nitrogen is not decoration. It is yield. Half the atmosphere is nitrogen. Plants still cannot use it. The chemistry matters because nobody eats chemistry. They eat what survives after it becomes fertilizer. The Haber-Bosch process changed that. It allowed one fertilizer plant to do what entire landscapes of manure, compost, and fallow rotation once struggled to provide. It fed billions. It also created a dependency most people never noticed. Roughly half of the protein in the modern human body is estimated to come from nitrogen fixed by this industrial process. Half. Not metaphorically, chemically. Remove that input, and the farmer is no longer calculating yield. He is calculating whether he can explain this to his bank. In 2022, fertilizer prices in many markets more than doubled within months as natural gas prices surged. Ammonia plants slowed or shut down. Farmers delayed purchases. Some cut nitrogen application by 30%. The field remembers that decision later. So does the grocery receipt. A corn farmer can reduce fertilizer this spring and still look successful in July. The tractor moves. The field looks green. The illusion holds. Then harvest arrives lighter. Then feed costs rise. Then eggs cost $7. Then a parent leaves a grocery cart half full. They do not call it supply chain failure. They just put the cooking oil back. I learned this the first time fertilizer doubled before groceries did. Farmers panicked months before shoppers did. This is why I watch fertilizer prices before I watch supermarket shelves. Shelves show comfort. Inputs show truth. The people who think they are farthest from agriculture usually meet it first at the checkout line. The checkout line is where most people think the food crisis begins. It does not. By the time someone leaves a grocery cart half full, the real decision was made months earlier in a field they will never see. People assume higher prices mean greed, bad policy, or temporary inflation. Sometimes it is simpler. The farmer looked at the math and decided not to plant, not because he forgot how, because planting became a loss. In western Kansas, a wheat farmer watches diesel climb from $3.20 to nearly $5 a gallon before harvest. His combine burns hundreds of gallons a week. Fertilizer already doubled. Repairs cannot wait. The bank still expects its payment in October. He runs the numbers twice. He is not afraid of bad weather. He is afraid of explaining another losing season at the dinner table. The tractor starts. The engine turns. Then the calculation stops it. One field stays untouched. Food shortages rarely begin with empty shelves. They begin with one field a farmer decides is too expensive to trust. An acre of corn can look profitable on paper until fuel, fertilizer, irrigation, and transport are counted honestly. Remove the subsidy of cheap energy, and profit becomes exposure. Sometimes the crop grows. Sometimes it rots. A trucker charges more to move it than the market will pay to buy it. Tomatoes stay in the field. Onions are plowed back into the soil. Milk is dumped because refrigeration and transport cost more than the sale. The public sees waste. The farmer sees arithmetic. The supermarket reports the ending. The planning decision wrote the beginning months earlier. 6 months. That is often the distance between a gas price spike and a family arguing over groceries. The shelves look calm because agriculture works on delayed consequences. Spring hides winter. A parent standing under fluorescent lights in December is living inside a decision made in April. I stopped calling it inflation the first time I watched a middle-class parent quietly remove food from a grocery cart. Hunger is loud. Financial embarrassment is silent. Most food crises begin with silence. And the first people to feel it are rarely the poorest. They're the people who believed responsible planning was enough. The question is never whether food exists. It is who can still reach it when the city remembers it cannot feed itself. The city remembers too late that it does not feed itself. That is the cold lesson in every food crisis. People assume the shelves are the system. They are not. They are the receipt. The real system is always upstream. In 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba did not lose farmland. It lost oil. It lost fertilizer. It lost imported feed, spare parts, pesticides, and the diesel that made industrial farming function. The fields were still there. The calories were not. Before the collapse, Cuba imported roughly 13 million tons of Soviet oil each year and depended heavily on subsidized fertilizer and mechanized agriculture. Within a few years, fuel imports fell by more than half. Fertilizer use collapsed. Tractor fleets sat idle. The country entered what it politely called the special period. Calories fell by around 40%. An adult who expected 3,000 calories a day learned to live on closer to 1,800. People lost weight without trying. Buses stopped running. Hospitals reported epidemics of optic neuropathy linked to malnutrition. A doctor in Havana could diagnose hunger by looking at someone's eyes. The accountant from the bread line was no longer asking what food costs. She was asking what still existed. This is the part I stopped trusting the word efficiency. Efficient systems are often just fragile systems with better marketing. Cuba's industrial agriculture looked productive right up until the imports stopped. Then the system revealed what it really was, an energy network pretending to be a food system. Now look at Britain in 1940. German U-boats cut shipping lanes. Britain imported more than half its food. By normal logic, it should have faced the same collapse. Instead, lawns disappeared. A mother in London did not call it resilience. She called it potatoes growing where roses used to be. Parks changed. Bomb craters became gardens. Citizens dug up tennis courts, railway edges, even parts of Hyde Park. The Dig for Victory campaign turned private gardens and public land into over 1.4 million allotments. One cabbage at a time. By 1943, millions of households were growing food locally. Potatoes replaced imports. Rabbits and chickens appeared behind row houses. Buckingham Palace kept vegetables on its grounds. The victory was not military first. It was domestic. Dinner survived because distance shrank. The system did not become comfortable. It became distributed. That was the difference. One system waited for ships. The other turned backyards into insurance. One protected efficiency. The other protected continuity. Resilience begins the moment food stops being something that arrives and becomes something that grows nearby. People do not panic when food becomes expensive. They panic when they realize the city has no memory of how to feed itself. People do not panic when food becomes expensive. They panic when they realize the city has no memory of how to feed itself. And cities forget faster than people think. An office worker can spend 20 years doing everything right, saving, paying the mortgage, building a retirement account, and still discover that none of it helps when bread costs more than the day's wage. In Cairo in 2008, bread prices surged as global grain costs spiked. Long lines formed before dawn. Workers waited hours for subsidized loaves that cost only a few cents because the unsubsidized alternative was impossible. One loaf. One day's dignity. That is who pays first. Not always the poorest, but the people with no distance between themselves and the truck. Urban life is built on that distance. Water arrives. Electricity arrives. Food arrives. Most people never need to ask from where. The system works by making dependence feel like convenience. The city feels rich because dependency arrives in clean packaging, until it doesn't. 72 hours. That is how quickly many modern cities begin to feel supply disruption once transport slows and inventories thin. Not starvation. Something more destabilizing: first, uncertainty. Shelves half full. Rumors full. A parent checks the grocery cart twice. Rice, eggs, cooking oil, bread. One item has to go. Then another. They are not buying less food. They are negotiating with embarrassment. Hunger is physical. Dependency is psychological. The city worker standing at the register does not call it agricultural policy. They just put the bread back because rent is due on Friday. I stopped calling it convenience the first time I realized most cities cannot feed themselves for a week. Meanwhile, 40 miles away, someone else is living inside the same crisis, very differently. A small farmer with healthy soil, saved seed, chickens behind the house, and neighbors who trade labor instead of invoices does not become immune. But the math changes. Less diesel required. Less fertilizer purchased. Fewer trucks between field and table. Fragility shrinks with distance. This is why the people who benefit first are rarely the largest producers. They are often the least dependent ones: the grower with compost instead of ammonia, the family with potatoes behind the fence, the neighbor who knows how to preserve tomatoes without a freezer. They do not look wealthy, but they possess continuity. Wealth is not having more inventory. It is having fewer points of failure. The supermarket measures inventory. The garden measures time. One system buys time with money. The other buys time with soil. And the most dangerous place in a food crisis is the place that forgot food was ever local. The most dangerous place in a food crisis is the place that forgot food was ever local. That forgetting creates both threads of this story. It creates the illusion that food comes from money, and it creates the panic when money no longer reaches it. A supermarket shelf looks like security because it hides the distance. The fertilizer plant is elsewhere. The diesel tank is elsewhere. The soil is elsewhere. The person making the planting decision is someone you will never meet. The city feels independent because dependency arrives on schedule. Until it doesn't. People often believe the safest system is the largest one, the biggest farm, the biggest distributor, the cleanest supply chain, the shelves that never look empty. But monoculture scales fragility faster than it scales safety. One disease leaf becomes 10,000. One delayed shipment becomes a regional shortage. One fertilizer plant offline changes the harvest of an entire season. The system is efficient because it is narrow. It is fragile for the same reason. Meanwhile, survival usually looks unimpressive. 1/10 of an acre, 4 raised beds, tomatoes, potatoes, beans, onions, a few hens behind a suburban fence, jars cooling on a kitchen counter in August because winter is already being negotiated in summer. It does not look like wealth. It looks like work. That is the trade-off history keeps repeating. Resilience demands time, skill, inconvenience, and the surrender of certain comforts. A lawn is easier than a garden. Delivery is easier than preservation. Convenience always feels cheaper until the bill arrives. This is why Soviet ducats mattered, why British allotments mattered, why small gardens kept appearing wherever large systems failed. They were not hobbies, they were spare lungs. One garden, one season. One family eats. The belief is that security lives in accounts, portfolios, and monthly statements, that enough numbers on paper can solve a physical shortage, but you cannot wire transfer tomatoes in a blackout. You cannot eat a retirement account. The older I get, the less impressed I am by systems that only work when trucks arrive on time. A suburban family learns this quietly. Their lawn is 1/10 of an acre. For years it was trimmed, watered, decorative. Then grocery bills changed. Eggs doubled. Produce became negotiation. They built beds where the grass used to be. Neighbors thought it looked like a hobby. By the second summer, it was dinner. The grocery cart returned with fewer emergencies inside it, less lettuce bought, fewer tomatoes, potatoes from the yard, herbs by the fence. Food did not become free. It became closer. They did not become self-sufficient. They became less negotiable. Wealth is not abundance. Wealth is continuity. And continuity is usually small enough to be ignored until it is the only thing left working. On the kitchen table, next to a brokerage statement, sits a grocery receipt from 2 years ago. Milk, eggs, bread, tomatoes, rice, $42. Today, the same receipt is $79. Outside, tomatoes are still growing without permission. Inside, the paper wealth still says everything is fine. One receipt, $79. The tomatoes came from the yard. That is the final contradiction. The system promised security through scale, distance, and efficiency. But when pressure arrived, the thing that mattered most was proximity, not abundance, access. Security is the distance between your dinner and someone else's failure. If this changes the way you look at a grocery store, keep following the record. Broken systems leave patterns. They repeat more often than people think. And the safest wealth is the kind that still works when the system forgets you.